Hello and welcome to Hate Read, a series on my channel where the one rule is for a book to be considered a hate read, I have to have read it more than once. And today's video is about A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. The thesis of this video, and for those that just want to be able to know what this video is about and click off, ultimately is that this book in the overall scheme of ACOTAR, if you're wanting to read it for the first time or you're wanting to reread it, just skip this book. It really is pretty much pointless to reread it or read it in the first place in the scope of the rest of the series. But if you just read this one and stop, it's a good standalone. But if you want to read the rest of the series, you might as well just not read this book. Nothing carries over, and especially from this book to the next one, certain details or characteristics about characters are completely disregarded for the sake of the plot, and it's ultimately just not good writing. So yeah, this was the third time I believe I've read this book, and from when I read it before, I literally couldn't remember what happens in the book from how disconnected it is from the rest of the series, and that's pretty telling considering this is the first in a series and it might as well not be a part of it. Just a summary of A Court of Thorns and Roses. It is a romantasy, it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and that's pretty much it. A spoiler alert. If you do not want to know what happens in this book because you have not read it yet, please stop watching this video. Just some background, my personal history with Sarah J. Maas. This book is 9 years old. As you can see, this is the original cover. I bought it when it came out. It came out in 2015. I have to say that the rebranding in recent years is very suspicious in that when this first came out and when I bought it and when I bought like the first 3 books in the novella, it was advertised to young adults, which I was at the time, but now it's advertised to adults, just adults. And I read this for the first time and the next one all when I was under the age of 18, but now it's targeted towards older people. That's suspicious and predatory, honestly. Y'all have the new ugly covers, or a lot of you do, and I have the old ugly covers because as you can see there's Feyre and then there's that, just the eyes peeking over. It's like, that's weird. But I have been here. I used to be an SJM stan. She used to be an auto-buy author for me, but she no longer is. And if anything, me and that woman have beef. The reason, there are 2 main reasons as to why Sarah J. Maas and I have beef. The first one is that I will never forgive her for what she did with Tamlin's character. For the sake of Feyre and Rhys's relationship in the next book, Tamlin's character is just completely disregarded and turned into pretty much the bad guy and antagonist so they can end up together. Yeah, everything that was said about him and different character points are just completely ignored. With being a character reader, when I first read this book, I loved Tamlin. And I remember finishing it for the first time and I was wondering like, oh, I wonder like what they're gonna do against like the king and stuff, and like I wonder how their relationship is gonna develop. And if you're a reader, you know that when books first come out, normally if it's a series and there's supposed to be a sequel, that it takes about a year for it to come out. So for a year, I'm thinking about Tamlin and how much I like Tamlin, blah, blah, all this stuff. And then I start reading the second one and he's the bad guy. And it's like, oh no. And the other reason why Sarah J. Maas and I have beef is because of what she did in A Court of Silver Flames. And I will end up reading the third one, the novella, and A Court of Silver Flames, but I'm not going to be doing that until probably November. I read this one and the second one in like one right after the other, so I need a break. In A Court of Silver Flames, my theory is that Sarah, her team, her marketing, her publisher, whoever, didn't think that Nesta by herself was going to bring enough money in, so Sarah decided that not halfway through Nesta's book, instead of it just being Nesta, it was turning into Feyre's pregnancy arc and all the horrible things that came with that. But when it comes to this book specifically, one of the things that makes it a hate read is the writing, honestly. Sarah J. Maas is very good at writing likable characters, snarky characters, having like entertaining interactions, but ultimately when you start looking a little bit harder, they tend to just fall apart. Feyre specifically, the main character, is an incredibly flat and passive character. She's the definition of things happening to her and not her taking initiative. Obviously, she does do that occasionally, but for the most part, it's just things happening. And from being a fan of Sarah J. Maas, from what I remember, when she's like writing her books, she like knows where she wants her characters to end up, but for the sake of the plot and just to get things moving along, she'll just like have the characters do whatever, even if it's out of character. Something else with the writing in this book, especially the dialogue, I would describe as clunky, if anything. There would be times when like one person would say something and then someone else would say something that like almost didn't have anything to do with what the person just said, and it was just weird. Or just the wording of certain lines that I would have to reread because I was like, what does that even mean? Like, it was just weird. There's so much exposition in this book. Being younger, I didn't even realize it, but oh my goodness, there's barely anything shown. Everything's just told. Instead of maybe having a flashback or something, I don't know, a character will just sit there and tell someone like their complete history, and it's just like, oh, okay, I guess we can't see anything, we just gotta hear about it, sure. I'm honestly surprised with how popular this book has gotten multiple times, because the first like 100 pages are like super boring, especially like before Feyre ends up going to Prythirin. It's just like boring. I'm like, if I didn't know what was going to happen, I wouldn't have kept reading, especially before. Like, if I just picked up this book, I would have put it down, because it's like, it's not that entertaining starting off. Nothing really happens until Rhys shows up, and then he leaves, and then he comes back, and then things start picking up a bit more. When Feyre decides to go under the mountain, that's like one of the few times that she is actually like taking initiative and taking action and like actually doing something. And when she like goes back to the spring court after like Tamlin sent her home, she's like, oh, I feel so bad, like it's my fault that all this is happening, da da da. And even Alice, like I think her maid or something, it was like, oh, you stupid girl, like you should have just told him you loved them, da da da. And it's like, it's not her fault. Like, what is happening, what has been happening in Prythirin, all these people being oppressed by Amarantha, is something that's been going on before Feyre was even born. She's only 19 in this book, and it's been going on for 50 years. It's like, how is it at all her fault? Like, that's just stupid. And then once she's under the mountain, things start picking up, and that's when Rhys becomes more prominent. And I will let you know now, I hate Rhys. The hate I have for him comes from A Court of Silver Flames, but in reading this book and like remembering what he's done, or what he will do pretty much, but also just like the way he's described, and like him purring, or him having like the low laugh of a lover or something like that, it just makes him like insufferable, and it makes me hate him like 1,000 times more. I really don't understand what is so likable about Rhys, because so much of his behavior and like the things that he does is questionable. Like when under the mountain, he has Feyre get all dressed up and it's very scantily clad, has her painted, and then before she ended up going under the mountain, Alice told her like, don't drink any of the wine, don't do any of that stuff. But then Rhys makes her drink it, and he admits to literally drugging her, and she like blacks out and doesn't remember what happens, and all she can see is like where she was touched, and obviously it was like only on her waist and stuff, but still. And Rhys made her dance for him in front of like everybody, and she's drunk, so she doesn't remember that. And he would say like, oh, he was trying to rile up Tamlin, but that's not a good excuse. You're still like exploiting her, especially like since he was already feeling affection for her at that time. He didn't know they were mates yet, but he still like was into her, you know. And that scene was the one where, or just that happening was when I started to realize that Sarah likes for her female characters to be objectified. Maybe it's something she likes and it just comes into her writing. And yeah, I read this like one article that was like, these books like these are like dangerous fantasies of like the author, of like the person writing it, and not necessarily like quality literature, you know. And I have to agree. And then when it comes to the bargain that Reese and Feyre make when Reese is offering her to like save her life, in this book, yes, the bargain, like Reese helps her with the challenges and stuff, but like the challenges are ultimately like stupid. The only reason for the bargain is so in the next book Feyre has a reason to go to the Night Court, and it's convenient for Sarah to be able to write later. She just is making it easy for herself, and it's lazy writing. Like, literally, why I say this book is pointless is because it's literally just setting up for the next book, and not even like with who you think it's going to be set up with like completely different characters. And it's so frustrating going from one to the other because it's like they're different books. It's insane. But in this book alone, because if you think about it, a book should be able to stand on its own even if it is a series. And like with so many trilogies especially, people talk about how like, oh, it's like the sequel curse, how the sequel is literally just like the author trying to move from the beginning of the story to the end instead of like something actually happening in the second book. And Sarah J Maas, she did this with Throne of Glass as well. The first book is just a setup of the world and what's going to happen, and then things actually start in the second book. But that's not how you should write a series. You should have the first book be the first book and have it be quality and not just literally just set up. That's why, yeah, just read the Spark Notes if you haven't read this and you want to. Like, there's no point in reading this because nothing other than like the world carries over. But yeah, with the bargain in this book, other than him helping her with her challenges, it really has no legs to stand on. It really doesn't make sense why Reese's character would want Feyre to come to the Night Court once a week, for a week, once a month. Like, why would he want to do that unless there was something we don't know? It's just stupid. I get into more of the reasons why I hate Reese in the next book, but with this one, I just want to say that having read the entire series, Tamlin and Reese are not all that different. And if anything, they're the two different sides of the same freaking coin. And as the series goes on, Reese shows himself to be way, way, way worse than Tamlin ever was. And I just think Reese is a weirdo. Like, another part of him under the mountain being weird is when Feyre's crying really bad and then he starts to like lick her tears off her face. And yes, later, I think in the next book, he talks about how like he was just trying to make her feel better. But ultimately it's like, did she say you could do that? Like, what? Why did you just assume that, oh, I'm going to make her feel better, so I'm going to start licking the tears off her face? Like, you're a weirdo, Reese. Oh, I can't stand it. And the one thing I appreciate about this book is the fact that it has short chapters. Oh my gosh, when books have short chapters, it makes them so easy to read. And I didn't fly through this book, but I did finish it faster than I could ever hope to finish it, thank God. But in conclusion, you spend over 400 pages watching these two characters fall in love, and if you're like me, you kind of fall in love with Tamlin as well. Like, there's so many good moments of Tamlin in here that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how could she just like disregard his character completely? Like when he tells her like the dirty limericks he used to make up, or when he shows her that like pool of starlight or whatever, or when it's a festival of some kind and he's like playing the fiddle and like Feyre's dancing and he's like, dance, Feyre, and it's so like touching. I really liked Tamlin in this book. I genuinely did. And in my personal opinion, I believe the Feyre and Tamlin in this one have much more chemistry than Reese and Feyre for the entire rest of the series, in my personal opinion. You spend a whole book watching these two characters fall in love just for you to start reading the next book, and it's like two completely different characters and a completely different story. It's just not well done at all. But yes, I will be getting into more of why that is in the next video. Hate Read episode 2, A Court of Mist and Fury, and it is up now if you want to watch it. But yes, this was the first episode of Hate Read. This book has not given me a lot to say about it, because of how it's like written and how it's done, it just is not very good. I can't lie. It's like things happen, yes, but it's almost like nothing happens, or it's like as soon as I'm done reading it, I forget what happens because of like just how things are done. I can't hate watch movies, I can't hate watch TV shows, I can't do that, but I can hate read a book for sure. But yes, have you read A Court of Thorns and Roses? What did you think? What did you rate it? Do you love this series? Do you hate it? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of me and hear how good of a singer I am, you can check out my music channel and original music, all under the name of Shy Fighter. Like if you want to like, subscribe if you want to subscribe. I don't know, do whatever you would like to do. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you when I see you. Farewell.